What's up, Dodgers Nation? My name is Clint. That other guy on the screen is, of course, Brooke. We are the editors here at DodgersNation.com, and we're excited to be joined by Kiley McDaniel. Kiley is an MLB insider at ESPN focusing on prospects, MLB draft, free agency, and more. His top prospect series just hit, I think, this week. It hit this month. You have a whole bunch of things going on over there at ESPN and ESPN Plus, including a top 100, top AL and NL prospects, top teams, plus Kiley's book, Future Value, The Battle for Baseball's Soul and How Teams Will Find Their Next Superstar, is being released next month. Kiley, welcome to the show, man. Welcome to hanging out with us. How you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me. I unfortunately wasn't able to get on the video end of things, but I'm on the back porch with my dog, so they're happy about this.
It's not a bad way to live.
Yeah, that's like half of it. That's the important half of I guess that's the social distancing, people finding new ways to take care of animals and do all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah,
but
I'm living half of the dream right now. I haven't figured out what the other half is yet.
So beyond the struggle of trying to navigate through life and living and all that stuff right now, you recently took to task ranking all 30 MLB farm systems. How tough was that?
It was a little bit easier this time than last time because I was at Fangraphs before I came to ESPN in February, and one of the things that Eric Longenhagen and I, who I wrote the book with, we worked together at Fangraphs. One of the things we were trying to solve was we never liked the process of trying to rank the farm systems, 1 to 30, based on just sort of eyeballing how good the players were. And so we tried to make it like a more objective process where we would have like a set like rating mirroring the way that I did it when I was in front offices. And then we had Craig Edwards, who still writes at Fangraphs, doing the research about like if you give a guy this grade, going through historical lists, this guy is worth, $30 million, this guy's worth 22 million, et cetera, et cetera. So you then, once you've ranked everybody and sort of done all the legwork, you just add all the numbers up and then you kind of have the answer. So this time ranking them 1 through 30, since I had already like decided like, the grades for all the different prospects was actually like pretty simple. And there's like little adjustments you can make where in general, having fewer prospects with the same amount of value as a system that has more prospects with the same value, the tiebreaker goes to the team with fewer. But other than that, there's not really that many adjustments once you've kind of done all the legwork.
Mm.
Yeah, what kind of things go into ranking in those systems? Like, what are you looking at with those prospects specifically?
Well, the sort of overriding thing that I'm trying to capture is trade value. And so the 30 teams have 30 different lists of how, like, what order they would put prospects in. And obviously some prospects would be more useful to different sorts of teams. So like a team that's competing now would rather a guy in AAA. A team that's rebuilding that is intentionally sort of trying to lose would rather a guy in rookie ball with more potential. And so what I try to do is find like a middle market team that is like competing, but not necessarily definitely a contender, and take like the middle part of those 30 different lists and then try to rank them based off of that. And so then there's all kinds of, very complicated ways you can get lost in the weeds, looking at all the different pieces of information you can get. Eric and I, when I was at Fangraphs and now while I'm at ESPN, we'll get access to some, exit velos and spin rates in the minor leagues that aren't available publicly to like help us, round guys up or down. But when it really comes down to it, it's, do you want this guy or do you want that guy? And when you're trying to parse, like, is this AAA second baseman better than this rookie ball pitcher? It just comes down to which guy do you want. And that's, it sounds super simple. It gets much more complicated than that. But picking one guy over another guy ultimately just comes down to which one do you want.
Yeah, 100%. So, obviously you look at this top 5 list, it's a lot of the names that you would expect in this recent, list that you put together. Except for the latter two, you probably don't expect. I'm not going to give away your top 5 because I think people should go read the article for sure. But it's kind of crazy to see the Los Angeles Dodgers sitting number 4 on that list. Like, were you surprised in kind of assessing 30 teams? Were you surprised to see just the insane amount of depth that Los Angeles has while going through this practice?
It was a little surprising. Like, I knew they would be in the top 10 for sure. We'd been keeping track of this for the last year at Fangraphs, and I had like a pretty decent idea of where things would land when I got to ESPN. That was my dog Scout trying to pipe in there. But I guess the interesting thing, and I had actually just been talking to some Yankees bloggers, and they were sort of asking about like, okay, so like the Yankees are obviously contenders, big payroll, a top 5 farm system. Like, where do they rank in terms of like top to bottom most effective organizations? And my example is, I think the Rays, the Yankees, and the Dodgers are the 3 teams that we actually talk about in the book as the sort of examples of sort of model organizations that like no organization is perfect. None of them are doing it, number one out of all 30 teams in all these different areas. But if you're trying to pick the teams that are above average at everything and sort of top 5 at a nice handful of things, the things usually that matter the most, it's the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Rays. And I think you could probably put them in any order you want to, but the fact that the Rays are up there with, like bottom 5 payroll, and the Yankees and Dodgers are up there with like top 5 payroll, that sort of explains like how amazing the Rays have done, and the reason that they now the GMs in LA, Houston, Boston, and the assistant GM in Milwaukee all came in recent years from Tampa, because like what they're doing is sort of unprecedented.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely. So Kiley, we know you're the prospect expert among us three. So we know that Gavin Lux sits kind of at the top of the Dodgers prospect list. So what are you seeing from this guy? What do you expect out of him in his future?
He's an interesting one that he seems particularly suited to play for the Dodgers. Because I think like a lot of these sort of top tier teams, they have more than just like a set 9 that go roll out there every day. There's a lot of platooning and multi-positional guys and versatility, and he can play second base. He's probably not a shortstop. He'd probably play a decent first or third. Obviously, corner outfield would be fine. And the fact that he's had some defensive issues, some we'll say light yips, and throwing issues, and is not the greatest glove in the world, but he's perfectly fine in terms of catching and throwing the ball at any position. And the fact that it's left-handed, it's power, it's hit, being able to put him in a bunch of different positions. He hasn't necessarily played all those positions, I said, but he's like technically capable of playing them. And it feels like there could be a sort of Ben Zobrist type role where it's, utility guy in that he plays a lot of positions, but he's actually like the 3rd or 4th best guy on the team. I think he fits in that sort of role in the short term, and in the longer term, like he could be, Chase Utley or, Jeff Kent or whoever you want to pick. Like he has that kind of upside to be the sort of perennial all-star at second base.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the top 5, really top 10 for the Dodgers organization. It's once again, we'll go with depth. That's the word. That's the what do you want to call that, Brooke? Like the show word. We hear that every single day of our lives when we're talking about the Los Angeles Dodgers and all that kind of stuff. And you look at the top 10, and it really is crazy, even with the trades and the last year's draft kind of filling it out, but really honing in on that top 5. Go right now to number 2. What's in your opinion, how high is the ceiling for somebody like Dustin May?
He's interesting because a lot of what these progressive teams like the Dodgers, Houston, the Yankees are doing with pitching is skewing toward, when there's not like a clear preference with the pitcher, four-seam fastball, high spin rate, fastball up in the zone, high spin curveball down in the zone. And May is more of like a sort of sinker slider type guy. It's not like he's exclusively that, like he's not Dallas Keuchel where it's just sort of touch and feel, not a lot of stuff, but he fits more into that realm of pitcher. And so that will limit the swings and misses you can get, even if you're, throwing 98 like he does. And so I think there's going to be a little bit of a dialing in the next couple of years, figuring out exactly how to figure out how to sort of optimize him, because he doesn't fit neatly into one of these buckets. But I think there's, guys like him, Brendan McKay, guys that are sort of at the big league level, seem pretty certain to be, in sort of war terms, 2 to 3, maybe 4 win guys, which is, probably third starter, maybe second starter. Like he's right in that area, which I have noticed when I talk to more casual fans, they don't get very excited when they ask about the top pitching prospect for their team. And I say, oh, second or third starter. And they're like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, that's like, second starter, it could be the 13th best pitcher in all of baseball. Like that's still really good.
It's it's good. It's good.
Yeah, and like a third starter is like, top 50, like probably makes multiple all-star teams. And then having him at the league minimum when those guys go for 15, 20 million now allows you to go spend that money on somebody else. So I wouldn't say he is an ace in the idea that there are literally a handful, less than 10 guys in the minor leagues that have a reasonable chance of being an ace. But the fact that he is high probability, big league ready at the tier just below that makes him extremely valuable.
Yeah, we just like guys that throw hard, I think. That's all we really like, right, Clint?
That's pretty much it. That's the goal. Throw hard, throw high.
There you go. Kiley, another guy that we've been excited about for a long time that's kind of been a little bit of a storyline since spring training, or I guess since spring training was called off. But Keibert Ruiz kind of saw a dramatic fall off in the prospect rankings. And it seems like less people are as high on him, I guess, as they were. What are you seeing from him?
So I was actually talking to an analyst with one of the more progressive clubs, and I was sort of asking him the same thing. I was like, I can see that there is not quite as much impact in his profile as some people saw in recent years, and he was saying that Keibert is the guy who probably has the most value lost by automatic strike calling, because he is a good blocker and receiver. He is an elite framer. He doesn't have a great arm. And then at the plate, it's a lot of contact without a ton of power. And so his profile was he's going to make a ton of contact. He's not going to strike out, put the ball in play, hit a couple homers, but he's going to give you elite framing ability. And if you remember back, going back, they were paying, Jose Molina $5 million when he was one of the worst hitting catchers in baseball because he was the elite framer that Ruiz is. Well, now if framing is essentially everyone goes to zero, which for some guys is a good thing, and for Keibert that would be a bad thing. And he's not going to hit a bunch of home runs, and he's just putting the ball in play. It's like, well, now that's like, a utility infielder, because you might be able to take like an athletic second baseman and go stick it behind home plate now if he's got a decent arm. So Ruiz still projects as like a strong everyday player, but now with Will Smith there, now his ceiling goes down a little bit. And if the idea of framing is sort of taken out, and then also he doesn't have the impact arm to necessarily shut down the running game, now sort of his defensive ability is seen as like, average, which in fact impacts his profile a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a guy that I really want to see up eventually, regardless. I think I was just so excited about him from the beginning that, I have to see him play at some point now. But
plus, Brooke isn't very high on Austin Barnes as a major league player, so sometimes
I'm not always completely sold on Austin Barnes. That's true. But kind of going along back to pitching. We got Brusdar Graterol in the offseason. It took us a Kenta Maeda trade, obviously, but we also got Luke Raley back in that trade. How long does it take for the Dodgers to officially win that trade? Because in my mind, without Raley, just Graterol for Maeda straight up, we already won that trade.
Yeah, because, Maeda was one of those guys, I'm sure you're aware, where it was sort of hanging by a thread. Like, you're just sort of waiting for when the arm's going to explode. Like, it seemed like, it's actually similar situation with Tanaka where it looked like he needed surgery and then he didn't, and you're sort of like, yeah, but this could happen at any point, even more so than any other pitcher. So yeah, I think having him not being one of your stone cold top 3 to 4 starters that would definitely start a playoff game and sort of being one of those utility arms you can move around, those guys have a lot of value. But obviously during the regular season, those guys have less value. They're more valuable in the playoffs. But in the playoffs, what is most valuable is you need that impact arm with big stuff. And Brusdar has arguably an 80 fastball, a 60 breaking ball, and actually knows where the ball is going. Like, he could be better than Kenley Jansen a year or two from now. And so you could argue then, well, if you're talking about a guy that is more of a playoff type arm in Maeda, Graterol is, maybe a better playoff type arm within the next year, and you're getting a lot more control for much less money. So you can totally see where that's going. But then if you go from Boston's point of view, where they're worried about his medical, if they just think this guy's going to break down and they see him as akin to Maeda and is, less proven, you can kind of see where they're coming from. And it just sort of comes down to how your doctors are reading the tea leaves here, which, as I found covering the draft, it wildly varies from team to team on the exact same player looking at the exact same information.
Yeah, for sure. People, different analytics groups, everybody sees something a little bit different. And I'm sure in your assessment of the Dodgers prospect in this case, obviously we're going to stick with the Dodgers, but in your assessment, kind of going through the club, I'm sure you found somebody that you identified as kind of a big sleeper in your opinion. Who really stood out for you that really is kind of maybe not in the top 30?
Ooh, not in the top 30. I was gonna give you some of the top 15 to 20 type guys that were.
I'll take that too. Yeah. I'm not trying to make your life hard here.
Well, I can work down the list, but Diego Cartaya, I'm sure you guys are long been aware of this guy. He was seen as him and Marco Luciano were the two best guys in the 2018 international class. Luciano obviously exploded and is now in the top 20 prospects in baseball. Cartaya is a catcher. Obviously, more of his ability is tied into defense and game calling and things like that. So it's going to take a couple more years for that to materialize and be obvious. But he could very well, I want to say by the end of the season. But after 50 more pro games, whenever that happens, he could be a top 100 guy. He's kind of right there on the verge. And I'd also say Andy Pages, who was, I guess, going to be a part of the Jack Peterson deal to the Angels.
Yeah. Former future Angel.
Yeah, which, maybe he's not super excited, but the Angels would be excited to have him back. He was the guy, along with Michael Busch, the second first-round pick for the Dodgers this year, all three of those guys came up as, hey, you might look smart if you throw him in the back of your top 100 right now, but I get if you're not going to put him on there yet because you need a little more info. But like, hey, have a quick trigger finger with these guys if you're going to move them up. Moving down the list a little bit, let's see. So Jordan Sheffield is another good example of exactly what I was talking about with how the Dodgers develop pitching. He's 95 to 98, touching 99. He has, which is rare for high velocity fastballs, also a high spin rate and the right like spin axis to get a lot of vertical movement, like the backspin on it. And has, not great command, but good enough. And he may be one of those guys that can actually get by throwing like 60, 70% fastballs. And like, just as long as it's in the strike zone, people are just going to swing and miss. I mean, ideally up in the zone, but could kind of be anywhere. And then moving a little further down, I was told Jolie Noah hit 100 last year. Marshall Kozowski, I'm going to say how you say it. He's up to 97. He's a high slot, sort of backspin, four-seam kind of guy. Hyun Il Choi, Korean righty. Looks like he could be a back-end starter. It was a rookie ball this year. Gerardo Carrillo up to 100 in the fall league. And then I would also say Michael Grove, who was taken out of West Virginia in the second round, needed Tommy John immediately. He now looks like he has passed, forgetting the guy's name, Mitchell White. Sorry, he's passed Mitchell White in some scouts' eyes, who was sort of the hot late rising name from a couple years before. Grove has now had Tommy John and maybe a little bit further along because he has slightly better characteristics for swing and miss on his fastball.
Yeah, I think beyond right now, beyond May and Gonsolin, you're looking at realistically, it's Grove. Well, it's Gray, then Grove, and then a bit of the rest, sort of in a way.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys with quality, like I said, Sheffield and Dennis Santana might be sort of short-term, like big league bullpen type guys, and then Jimmy Lewis, Michael Grove, Ryan Pepio. You got a bunch of guys that have like good qualities, and whichever one sort of makes an improvement first will be that sort of next in line.
Yeah, I mean, there was one guy, Brooke has one guy for sure he liked in spring.
Yeah, I mean, did you get to see Cody Thomas play at all? I mean, obviously during spring he was like the guy during spring, but we liked what we saw from him.
Yeah, he's a punter. I'm sure you guys know his background as a football player that didn't play tons of baseball, and then just it was sort of like there's some tools, we like some elements, and then he just hits the eight. Oh, dogs are barking again. Hold on, I need to calm down. Hey, stop. But hitting all those home runs right into pro ball, has huge raw power, good athlete, checks a lot of boxes. Will probably never be a guy that hits for huge average, but yeah. In terms of where you got and what you paid for him, I think he's already probably returned positive in that regard.
For sure. Well, while we have you here, obviously beyond the Dodgers, beyond everything, we're here in this awful coronavirus shutdown, lockout, and everything really for the 2020 calendar year is kind of up in the air. So I'd hate to not ask your thoughts on the status of the upcoming draft. It's kind of, what have you heard? Rumors are saying it might be skipped. What have you heard, and what are you feeling with it?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that myself and Jeff Passan are kind of keeping tabs on. Some things we haven't quite reported yet because we're kind of waiting for some movement, some confirmation, both sides to sort of say we're going to take these 2 points we agree on and move forward. But the sort of direction I've heard things going is that the conversation about not having a draft was like one of 10 options, and it's maybe the least likely of those options. I don't think that they really want to create a double draft scenario. For another reason, the union's probably not going to like if they just skip a draft, keep the exact same draft slots, and have twice as many players eligible. You're going to be sending a bunch of guys instead of four-year colleges. They're going to go to junior colleges if they were high school kids that wanted to sign. It's just going to have so many different issues. And then also, if the other issue that the owners want to solve is, well, we don't want to spend $10 million on players and we're not playing. Well, in some cases, if you spend $10 million in the free agent market, you get about $10 million back on average. In the draft, you're getting like 5 times, maybe 10 times that back. So it's like, do you really want to not buy stocks at a huge discount? Like, that seems like something you want to keep doing. So I think it's a little bit of a posture to sort of make it seem like that there wasn't going to be a draft. So, in some ways, the owners may say, hey, if we're going to have a draft, let's make that to where it's a concession. So I think that's where it's headed. I think there's going to be a draft. I could guess on timing, but in reality, like, none of us have any idea when this is going to end up. So we also don't know when this is going to happen.
Right, for sure. It's definitely a strange time right now. Kylie, before we let you go, I can't not ask you about your book that's coming out. Specifically, the last part of it where it says how teams will find the next superstar, because I'm trying to figure out how teams are going to find me. You want to tell us a little bit about this book?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. Yeah, so the sort of initial idea behind the book was when Moneyball came out 15 years ago, scouts were scared that they were going to get replaced by analysts. And it turned out that they weren't, because scouting reports in a lot of cases, especially at the lower levels in amateur baseball, scouting reports were more predictive than numbers were. Like having a full report from a good scout is better than knowing the on-base percentage of a high school player or even a college player. So now with StatCast, TrackMan, information, they're all the way down to high school games and college games. Teams now have the ammunition to start replacing scouts with analysts if they want to, and some teams are doing this, more aggressively than others. The Astros being like sort of the foremost, like most progressive team in this area. And so Eric and I wanted to write a book, and the sort of broad outline, the sort of 3 sections we have. One is a section about July 2 international signing period and the draft. And we have dozens of stories from scouting directors describing how they drafted or signed like current top prospects, Hall of Famers, big league stars, that kind of thing. And then between those stories, we sort of explain the rules, the strategy, like different ways to take advantage of these things, what sort of best practices are. The second section is like, if you want to scout, we got about 100 pages in there teaching you how to scout, like step by step. There will be a website that'll be up when the book comes out, with videos that go with the text to sort of explain to you how to do this. And then the last section is just about statistics, going all the way back to Branch Rickey, up to sort of Moneyball and sort of the on-base percentage and all that sort of stuff. And now to like how teams like Houston or the Dodgers are creating statistics using TrackMan and StatCast, and what these metrics tell them, what a scout could tell you, and how they're like sort of making decisions replacing these guys if they want to. And then also at the end, as you could probably guess, like our sort of judgment about like where things stand and what, should be done. We just figured there were so many sort of novel things happening in this area that we kind of needed to take you on a journey, around all these different areas.
Seems reasonable. And you said this book is being released next month. Is that when it's coming out?
Yeah. So first week of April. And also I would say that of the sort of many scouting directors, whether domestic or international, that we interview, one of them is with the Dodgers and describes a number of signings that he did with his prior team and that he did with his current team.
Awesome.
So yeah, there's Dodger specific stuff in there as well.
Cool. Perfect. Good shutdown read right there. I mean, people are home. We're gonna be home. That sounds like fun. So if you could get us that advanced copy, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Get in touch with the publicity people.
Yeah,
there you go.
Kiley McDaniel, we appreciate your time, man. Where can people find you on the internet? And I mean, if you have anything else you want to add too, I don't want to take away from any not FaceTime here, but yeah, if you have anything you wanted to add before heading out, just let people know where to find you and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, my stuff will be on ESPN Plus. I'll tweet all that stuff out. I'm at Kiley MCD on Twitter, Kiley McDaniel on Instagram, and then obviously Feature Value in stores in a couple weeks here.
Awesome. And how many dog pics do we get on Instagram?
Ooh, there's a pretty good number, and it's going to be growing. I'm in the process. I think I might get verified soon. So at that point, you have to celebrate with more dog pics.
Yeah, 100%. Once again, we appreciate you coming and hanging out with us right now. You stay safe and wash your hands.
Yeah, thanks, man. Have a good one.
Thanks, Kylie.